The rain had been falling since noon, and by 7 o'clock it had turned into something worse, a fine, relentless mist that didn't fall so much as hang, pressing itself against every crack in the old house on Willow Street like it was looking for a way inside. Ethan Hayes stood at the living room window with his arms crossed, watching the street lamp through the fog. The light it threw was yellow and weak. Across the road, the Morrisons' porch was dark. Down the hill, the gas station sign had gone out. The whole town of Millhaven, Oregon, was folding in on itself the way small towns do when the weather turns genuinely mean, not dramatic, just slow and grinding and indifferent to you. He checked the thermostat for the third time. 61 degrees, down from 64 when he'd checked 30 minutes ago. The baseboard heaters along the north wall were ticking but putting out almost nothing. The old boiler in the basement had been struggling since September, and Ethan had put off calling the repair service the way he put off everything that cost money he didn't have. He heard Noah cough from the back bedroom. Not a deep cough. Just the kind a 6-year-old makes when the air is too cold and too dry and he's been breathing it for too long. It was a small sound, barely anything, but to Ethan it carried the particular weight that all of his son's sounds carried since Rebecca died. He had become, in 2 years of single fatherhood, a man who listened too hard, who catalogued coughs and silences and the quality of a child's breathing in the dark the way a sailor catalogues weather. He stood still for a moment. Then he walked down the short hallway and pushed the door open slowly. Noah was in his bed with 2 blankets pulled to his chin, his blonde hair damp at the temples, his lips carrying just the faintest tinge of color that Ethan didn't like. The boy was awake, watching the ceiling. "Hey, Bud. Hey, Dad. You warm enough?" Noah thought about it, genuinely considered the question, the way 6-year-olds do when they're trying to give you the honest answer, not just the one that makes you stop worrying. "Kind of," he said. Ethan came in and sat on the edge of the mattress. He pressed the back of his hand to Noah's forehead. "Cool." His small fingers, when Ethan took them in his palm, were almost cold. "Kind of isn't warm enough," Ethan said quietly. He went to the window. The gap at the bottom of the frame he'd been meaning to weather strip it since August was letting in a thin thread of outside air that he could feel if he held his hand close. Through the glass, the backyard was invisible, just gray-black and rain. His phone showed 1 bar of signal. He'd tried calling his neighbor, Dale Kowalczyk, 40 minutes ago about borrowing a space heater. No answer. He'd tried the power company's outage line. A recording. He'd checked the road conditions. The highway north of town had 2 downed lines, and they weren't estimating restoration until morning at the earliest. He stood there for a moment, doing the math. The temperature outside was 34 degrees and dropping. The boiler wasn't going to suddenly improve. Noah had gotten a chest cold 3 weeks ago, and the pediatrician had specifically said, "Keep him warm. His immune system is fighting hard enough as it is." There was one room in the house that still held real warmth. The room on the south side, the one with the newer insulation and the door that fit its frame properly. The one he'd given to Claire 8 months ago, when she arrived with 2 suitcases and said she didn't know where else to go. He stood in the hallway between their doors for a moment, long enough to hear the wind push against the eaves, long enough to remind himself that he was a grown man who had fixed engines in a cold garage all his adult life, and that whatever discomfort he felt about knocking on his stepsister's door was approximately nothing compared to his son's lips going the wrong color in November. He thought about what he knew about Claire Brooks, which was not much. He knew she'd grown up in Salem with her mother and Dennis, his stepfather, after Dennis and his own mother had split, which meant she and Ethan had existed in separate orbits of the same second family for most of their lives. He knew she'd come to him in February because she didn't have another option, or if she did, she hadn't seen it at the time. He knew she stayed in her room too much, worked double shifts at the diner on Wednesdays and Saturdays, drank her coffee black, and had once left a book on the kitchen table, something about trauma-informed care and emergency medicine, that he'd picked up and set back down without reading. He knew she was quiet in a way that wasn't peace. It was the quiet of someone who had learned, through some specific and probably recent damage, that silence was safer than speaking. He had never pressed it. He had his own version of that lesson, and he respected the distance it required. But tonight, the distance had a body count. He knocked. There was a pause before she answered. Long enough that he almost knocked again. Then, "Yeah? It's Ethan." Another pause. He heard something, the quiet of a person setting something down, deciding something. Then, the door opened. Claire Brooks was 24 years old and small in a way that was less about height than posture. She had a habit of holding her shoulders slightly forward, like she was protecting something. She was wearing a gray sweatshirt and wool socks, and she had a paperback in one hand, finger tucked in to hold her place. She looked at him and waited. "The boiler's going," he said. "Noah's cold. His room is dropping." She looked past him toward the hall. "His hands are cold." He coughed. He paused. "Your room's the warmest in the house." She seemed to understand the ask before he finished making it. Something moved across her expression, not quite wariness, not quite relief. Something he couldn't name because he hadn't looked at her closely enough in 8 months to have built up a catalog of her expressions. "Okay," she said. "I'll set up on the floor. Noah can have the bed." "Ethan." She said it like a correction. "It's fine. You don't have to sleep on the floor." "I don't want to." He stopped, rearranged. "I just don't want it to be weird." She looked at him evenly. "It's November and your son is cold. It's not weird." They moved together with the efficient discomfort of two people who share a house without sharing a life, polite, careful, aware of each other's perimeter. Claire pulled her extra blankets from the closet, while Ethan went and carried Noah down the hall. The boy drowsy and cooperative, his small arms loose around Ethan's neck. They set up the room the way people do in genuine emergencies. Practically. The camping lantern from the garage hall closet, the little gas burner that Ethan used for hunting trips, set up on a ceramic tile in the corner with a pot of water for humidity, the heavy comforter from Noah's bed layered over Claire's. It took about 20 minutes, and during those 20 minutes, they spoke mostly in functional exchanges, the tiles in the bottom cabinet. "Do you need matches? There's another blanket in the top shelf on the right." The economy of it was, in its way, a relief. They had found a shared language in practical necessity when there was no other language between them, Ethan thought, moving around Claire's room with armloads of blankets, that sometimes this is how people start, not with words, but with the geometry of solving the same problem in the same space. Noah, settled against the pillows with his blankets tucked around him, looked at the lantern and then at the two adults and then at the gas flame's blue circle and said, "This is like camping." "Exactly like camping," Claire said. "Is there hot cocoa in camping?" Claire glanced at Ethan. He looked at the pot of water on the gas burner. "We can make that work," he said. It was such a small domestic negotiation. Who has the cocoa powder? Where's the mug? Careful, the handle's hot, but Ethan noticed it as it was happening, the way you notice things when they're new. They had shared a kitchen for 8 months and had somehow managed to exist in near-perfect parallel. The same refrigerator, different shelves, the same table, different hours. He had come home to find her dinner dishes washed and drying, and had felt something he wouldn't have named as loneliness. He named it now, briefly. Then, let it go. Noah drank his cocoa with both hands around the mug, elbows on the blanket, looking at Claire with the frank, assessing gaze that children have before they learn to be polite about curiosity. "Can you tell me a story?" he asked. Ethan started to say something, some gentle parental deflection about it being late, but Claire said, "Sure." He watched her settle sideways on the bed, her back against the headboard, knees pulled up, one arm around Noah like it was the most natural thing in the world. He had not expected that. He sat in the chair, he'd moved to the corner, and he watched. She told a story about a fox. The fox was young and got separated from its family in a rainstorm, and spent a long time walking through wet fields looking for something that felt like home. Not a dramatic story, The stakes were small, the fox was cold, the fox was confused. The fox kept making wrong turns in the dark, but Claire told it in a quiet voice that didn't perform, didn't lift at the dramatic moments or soften artificially at the tender ones. She just told it the way it went, and somehow that made it more true. The fox eventually found a barn. A farmer's barn. Dry and full of hay and the warm smell of animals. The farmer didn't chase the fox away. He just left a bowl of water near the door and went back inside. The fox stayed 3 nights. Then it found its family. But every winter, the story said, the fox came back and sat at the edge of that field and looked at the barn for a while before going home. Because some places stay in you even after you leave. Noah was asleep before she finished. Ethan sat in the chair and didn't say anything. The gas flame was low. The rain was steady and soft against the window. The lantern made a warm circle on the ceiling. "That was good," he said finally. His voice was lower than he intended. "My mom used to tell it differently," Claire said. She was still looking at Noah. "The fox found its family the first night. Mine takes longer." He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. But he filed it away, the fact that she had changed the story. The fact that in her version, the lost thing stayed lost a little longer before it found what it needed. He thought he was beginning to understand something about Claire Brooks. They sat in the near dark for a while after Noah dropped off. Claire had moved from the bed to the floor, her back against the side of it, blanket over her lap. Ethan stayed in the chair. The gas burner made its small sound. Somewhere outside, a branch dragged across the house siding. Ethan had not planned to say anything. He was good at that, at sitting with silence. Letting it run out the clock until morning made everything easier. He'd had 2 years of practice, but Claire said, quietly and without preamble, "I never said I was sorry." He went still. "I wanted to," she continued, "when I first got here. But you were so," she paused, "closed. And I didn't know you well enough to push." Rebecca. His wife's name in someone else's mouth in this dark room. "It's fine," he said, the automatic answer. "It's not fine. She was your wife and you lost her, and I moved into your house 6 months later and acted like I was just a tenant. You were just a tenant. I was your stepsister. We'd met twice before you moved in, Claire." "I know." A pause. "That's on both of us. On our parents, mostly." She pulled the blanket higher. I'm sorry she's gone. I'm sorry you've been carrying this alone." He sat with that for a while. The thing about genuine condolences, offered honestly by someone who doesn't know you well enough to be performing them, there's a quality to them that the practiced kind doesn't have. They land differently. "I think about whether it was my fault," he said. He hadn't planned to say it. It was just there, in the room. After 8 months of being nowhere but inside him, Claire didn't react with alarm or rush to reassure him. She waited. We'd argued that morning. About it doesn't matter what about. Something stupid. She left angry. She was driving in the rain, and she was angry, and she hit the guardrail on Dexter Road. He stopped. Started again. If I hadn't said what I said, if I'd just let it go the way I should have, she'd have left calm. She'd have been paying attention. The rain moved against the window. Inside, quiet. "You don't know that," Claire said. "The rain was bad that day. I looked it up after. There were 3 other accidents on that road in the same hour." "I know. So why are you still carrying it like you do?" He looked at the flame in the corner. The blue circle of it, steady and small. He had spent 2 years building a life around a wound he refused to examine. Directly the same way you can live with a structural problem in a house by simply not going near the damaged wall. You learn the geography of your own avoidance. "Because it's easier," he said, "than carrying the fact that she's just gone. That there's no reason. That it just happened." He heard his voice, low and flat and honest in a way he hadn't been in a long time. Not with anyone. "If it's my fault, I have something to hold, something to explain it. A story." He exhaled. "Without the fault, I just have absence." And I don't know how to make a life around absence. I've been trying for 2 years, and I still don't know how." Claire was quiet for long enough that he thought maybe that was the end of it. Then she said, "I understand that." And from the way she said it, the weight of it, the recognition in it, the way you speak a thing you have never said aloud but have lived next to for a long time, he knew she wasn't just being kind. "My mom died 14 months ago," Claire said. He hadn't known that. He'd known she was gone. His stepfather, Dennis, had mentioned it in passing, the way Dennis mentioned most personal things, briefly and without effect, but he hadn't known the timeline. 14 months. She'd shown up on his doorstep 8 months ago. 6 months after. Cervical cancer, she said. Stage 4. We caught it late because she kept putting off the appointment. She always put herself last. She said this without bitterness, more like she was reporting a weather pattern, something that simply was. By the time they found it, they gave her 4 months. She made it 6. She was stubborn. A small sound in her voice on that word. Stubborn. Something close to love and grief together. I was doing a nursing program in Portland. 2nd year. When she got the diagnosis, I took a leave to come home and be with her. She stopped, pushed her thumb against the edge of the blanket. Except the last 2 weeks I had to go back because there was a licensing thing. A practicum requirement I couldn't reschedule or I'd lose the whole year. I went back, told myself she had more time. She'd been stable. She stopped again. She died on a Tuesday morning while I was in class. Ethan didn't say he was sorry. It seemed too small. I couldn't go back to the program after, Claire said. I kept telling myself I would. I kept renewing my leave. But every time I thought about walking into that building, She shook her head. "I've been a waitress for a year. Which is fine. I'm good at it. But that's not the real thing." "What stopped you?" "Going back. Guilt, mostly." She said it plainly. No performance. But also I think I started to believe that if I didn't get close to anything again, I couldn't lose anything again. Which sounds logical until you realize you're living in a stranger's house and barely leaving your room. A short exhale that might have been a laugh. "I'm 24 and I've been behaving like a person who's already finished living." She tilted her head back against the mattress and looked at the ceiling. "I'm tired of running," she said. "I've been running for over a year and I'm genuinely, physically tired of it." Ethan looked at his son's sleeping shape under the blanket. The small rise and fall of it. He thought about how he came home from the garage every day and cooked dinner for 1.5 people and put Noah to bed and sat in the kitchen with the light over the sink on because the alternative was sitting in the dark, and how that was somehow better than turning the rest of the lights on. Because turning them on meant acknowledging that it was too quiet. "I know that kind of tired," he said. "I know you do," she said, and somehow that was enough. The flame in the corner was getting low. Ethan reached over and turned the burner up a fraction. The blue circle brightened. Outside, the rain had changed, pitch not lighter, but steadier, like it had settled into something long-term and resolved. "I thought you didn't like me," Claire said. He looked at her. "I don't dislike you. That's not the same thing." He thought about it. The honest version. "I didn't know how to have you here. You're Dennis's daughter, and Dennis we've always been." He searched for it, obligated to each other. "He married my mom when I was 11. We were never unfriendly. We were just never real. He sent me to you because he didn't know what else to do with me," Claire said, without apparent resentment. "He's not good at real either. When you showed up, I thought she's going to stay a few weeks and then leave. And that would have been fine. But then weeks became months and we were just coexisting, and I didn't know how to break out of that without it being awkward. So you didn't. So I didn't." She nodded slowly. "Neither did I." The lantern put a warm angle of light across her face. She looked, in this light, less like a 24-year-old girl trying to be inconspicuous and more like what she actually was, someone who had been hurt badly and had learned, as her primary coping strategy, To take up as little space as possible. You're not a burden, Claire. She looked at him quickly. You haven't been a burden since you got here. I know I made you feel like one. That was my failure, not yours. He stopped. The words came out rough, the way words do when they haven't been used much. Your family. That word is supposed to mean something. I've been bad at letting it. She pressed her lips together. Her eyes were bright. You told my son a story about a fox in the rain, he said. And you said it like you've been thinking about that fox for a long time. He looked at Noah. You changed the ending. You made it take longer because the honest version is harder and you thought he was old enough to handle the real story. She was quiet. I don't think a person who does that is a burden. She cried, then not loudly, not dramatically. Just a few tears that she didn't try to stop. She tilted her face down and let them fall, and then breathed out, long and slow, like something had been released from a pressure it had been under for a long time. Ethan didn't move toward her or away. He just let her have it. After a minute, she said, I want to stay. You can stay. No, I mean I want to actually be here, not hiding in my room. I want to, she stopped, steadied. I want to be someone Noah knows. I want to be someone you know. Okay, he said. Okay? Yeah. The power came back at 6:43 in the morning. Ethan knew because the clock on the microwave started blinking, and the hall light came on, and Noah, who had been sleeping in a dense, healthy sleep for the past 9 hours, stirred at the change. Claire was already awake. She'd been awake for a while, he could tell by the quality of her stillness. The way she was sitting up with her mug of coffee, she'd made it on the gas burner, quietly, without waking them. And looking at the window, where the rain was still coming down but softer now, more like the end of something than the middle. Ethan sat up. Noah burrowed deeper and went back to sleep. Coffee? Claire asked. Yeah. She poured it from the small camp pot. He took it, and they sat for a few minutes in the gray morning light without talking. It wasn't the silence of the night before loaded, careful, navigating around things. The ordinary quiet of two people sharing a morning. His color looks better, Claire said, nodding at Noah. Ethan looked. She was right. The faint pallor from the night before was gone. The boy was pink and loose-limbed and breathing easy. Thank you, Ethan said. For what? He gestured vaguely at the room, the blankets, the burner, the cocoa, all of it. That's just what people do, she said. Not always. She considered that. No, she said. Not always. They made breakfast together, eggs and toast, and the last of the orange juice working around each other in the small kitchen with a naturalness that surprised him. She knew where the spatula was. He knew she took her eggs without salt. Neither of them had known these things consciously before, but apparently 8 months of parallel living had been paying attention on their behalf, filing away the small details of each other's habits, the way houses absorb the sounds and rhythms of the people who move through them. Ethan stood at the stove and thought, when did I stop noticing her? The answer, he suspected, was before he'd started. She had arrived in February when the ground was still frozen, and he had been 11 months into grief, the stage of grief that doesn't look like grief from the outside, the one that looks like a man who goes to work and comes home and takes care of his kid. He had been so contained in his own weight that he had made room for Claire the way you make room for furniture. Functionally, without warmth, she had responded in kind. He couldn't blame her. She had been raw herself, and she had read, accurately, that this was a house where people did not open up. So she had done what survivors do. She had made herself small and waited to see if anyone was going to be kind to her. It had taken a power outage and a sick child and one November night to do what 8 months of proximity had not. He flipped the eggs. The toast popped. She poured the juice, 3 glasses full for him and herself. Half for Noah because a full glass was still a spill risk. Small things. We know, Claire said. How do you know? You're always hungry after camping. Noah thought about this. Is that a rule? Absolute rule. Noah climbed onto his chair with the gravity of someone who has just learned an important fact about the world. Okay, he said. It was Claire who remembered Eleanor White. They were eating, and she said, suddenly, quietly, "Has anyone checked on Mrs. White?" Ethan set his fork down. Eleanor White was 82 years old and lived in the White House at the end of the block with a cat named Sullivan, and a landline that she refused to upgrade, and a particular kind of stubbornness that had seen her through 2 husbands, 1 flood, and 40 years in a house with drafty windows because she didn't like what double-paned glass did to the quality of the light. She also, Ethan knew, had a heating system that was older than he was. "I'll go," he said. "I'll come with you. You don't have to, Ethan." She said it the same way she'd said it the night before, when he'd offered to sleep on the floor. Like a correction. Like, "We are not doing that anymore." "Noah," he said. "Bring him," she said. "Fresh air is good for him. He's warm now." They went together, Noah in his winter coat with his hood up, Ethan in his work jacket, Claire in a coat he'd never seen before, dark green and fitted, collar turned up. The rain had pulled back to a mist. The street was silver and still. Their footsteps were loud on the wet pavement. The walk to Eleanor White's door took 4 minutes. The exterior of the house was dark. The curtains were closed. Ethan knocked and waited, and when there was no answer, he knocked harder. And then a sound came from inside, slow, deliberate footsteps, and the door opened. Eleanor White was dressed, which was a good sign. But her color was wrong pale in the way that has to do with cold, the blood having retreated to protect the core. She was holding the door frame, and she looked at Ethan, and then at Claire, and then at Noah, and she said, "I was going to come over soon." "No," Ethan said. "You were not." She looked at him with the dry, clear eyes of a woman who has been read correctly by people she respects. "No," she admitted, "I was not." Her house was cold. Not Noah's level of cold, dangerous cold, the kind that had been working on her all night, the kind that settles into an old person's joints and chest without announcing itself. Sullivan, the cat, was sitting on the kitchen counter in the particular way of a cat who wants you to know they find the situation unacceptable. There were 3 empty mugs on the table, which meant Eleanor had been making hot tea through the night trying to compensate, which was something but not enough. "Get your coat," Ethan said. "I'm not, Mrs. White," Claire said, from behind him. Her voice was very calm, very clear. The kind of calm that isn't indifference but deliberate steadiness. The voice you put on when the situation calls for it, and you have the training, or the instinct, to know that. "I used to be a nursing student. You've been cold for too long. You need to warm up slowly, which means you need to come with us and sit somewhere warm and eat something. You can come back tonight when they've fixed the heating." Eleanor White looked at her for a long moment. There was assessment in it, the kind that old people perform when they have no patience left for social performance, and are simply deciding what they think of you based on what they actually see. "You have good hands," the old woman said. Claire blinked. "What?" "The way you're standing. The way you spoke just now. Steady. You have nurse's hands, whatever you think you are at the moment." She turned to get her coat. "Fine. But Sullivan comes too." For the rest of that day and into the next, they were 4. Eleanor White occupied the armchair in Claire's room, now the common room, now the warm room, with Sullivan on her lap and a cup of strong tea and an opinion on everything. She had lived in Millhaven since 1979, and she had survived, by her own count, 11 bad winters, 2 difficult marriages, 1 house fire that had taken the original back porch, and the slow disappearance of everyone who had known her when she was young. She had not survived all of that by being gentle about it. "The winter of '89 was worse than this," she said. "Nothing is worse than last night," Noah said, with great authority. "Lest you were asleep for most of last night. I was camping." Eleanor White looked at him over the rim of her mug. "What were you camping from?" "The cold," Noah said. "And what did you learn from it?" Noah considered this with the seriousness of a philosophy student. That camping is better with more people. Eleanor White looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at his coffee. "Smart boy," she said. Claire managed the food situation with a quiet competence that Ethan watched with something like wonder. She went through the cabinets and the refrigerator and made an inventory and made a list, and from that list made 3 meals out of what they had, stretching it the way people who have been careful with money know how to stretch things. She was not asking permission or offering to help, she was simply doing the necessary thing in the way it needed to be done. There was a decisiveness to it that surprised him. He had seen only the careful, contracted version of Claire for 8 months, the one who made herself small, who asked before using anything, who apologized for the space she occupied. This version moved through his kitchen like it was hers, because right now it was, and she knew that, and she was getting on with it. At some point in the afternoon, Ethan went down to the basement to assess the boiler, and found that one of the intake valves had cracked. Not catastrophic, replaceable, but not today. He came back upstairs and told Claire, and she said, "How long?" "Tomorrow afternoon if I can get the part. I have enough food for 2 days," she said. "Mrs. White's heating? I'll call the service company when signal comes back." She was already writing something on the notepad on the counter. "I'll call the shelter too, just in case. And I'll check in with her tonight before bed. She needs to warm up gradually. Her circulation's been compromised. I want to make sure she doesn't spike a fever." She was talking about a medical protocol the way other people talked about checking the weather. Casually, with authority. The way someone talks about something they actually know. He stood in his kitchen and looked at this 24-year-old woman who had been hiding in his house for 8 months and thought, "I did not know you at all." He was beginning to. The second night was easier. The boiler came back the next afternoon. Ethan drove to the hardware supply in the next town for the valve, installed it in 2 hours, and by 4 o'clock the baseboards were warm again. Mrs. White Service Company sent someone who confirmed that her unit was technically functional but needed monitoring, and she returned to her house with Sullivan and a look of dignified gratitude that she expressed by leaving a covered pie dish on their porch the next morning. Normal reasserted itself, but it reasserted itself differently. Claire came out of her room, not just to cook or use the bathroom. She came out and sat in the living room and read her book and had a conversation with Ethan about the news, about the state of the town's road maintenance, about nothing in particular. She and Noah started a puzzle together on the coffee table, 500 pieces, a map of the American West that they worked on in 15-minute increments over several evenings. Ethan came home from the garage on Thursday to find Claire and Noah in the kitchen. Noah was standing on his step stool, hands in a bowl of bread dough, concentrating with his whole body. Claire was leaning against the counter, coaching him on the kneading motion. And she was laughing the real kind, surprised out of her, not produced for anyone's benefit. He stood in the doorway and watched for a moment before they noticed him. Noah looked up and said, with flour on his nose, "Dad, Aunt Claire's teaching me bread," and then immediately went back to the dough, as if this were already settled. Ethan caught Claire's eye over Noah's head. Her expression had gone very still. Not unhappy, something more careful. The way you look when something lands that you didn't know you were waiting for, and you're trying not to break it by reacting too much. "Aunt Claire," Ethan said. She looked at him. "Sounds about right," he said. Something in her face released. She nodded. Once. Turned back to Noah and said, "Okay, more push and less pull." Noah pushed with great determination. "Good," Claire said. "That's exactly right." 3 weeks after the cold snap, Ethan sat in his truck outside the garage at the end of a long day and thought about how to name what had changed. The house was the same house. The bills were the same bills. The boiler now worked, but it was going to need a full replacement before next autumn, and that was going to cost money he would have to figure out. He still had guilt he carried, though he was learning slowly, unevenly, with setbacks to carry it differently. Some mornings he woke up and the first thing he felt was the weight of Rebecca's absence, and it sat on him for an hour before he could move through it. Some mornings it was there and he moved through it faster, the way you can move through fog that you know has an edge. Progress was not linear. He was learning that too. Claire was still finding her way back to herself, still figuring out whether the nursing program was the right path or whether that chapter had closed in a way that couldn't be reopened. She had called the admissions office twice in the past 2 weeks. Both times she had hung up before the call connected. Ethan had seen her do it once, standing in the hall, phone in hand, looking at the screen. He had not said anything. He had made coffee and put a mug on the counter where she would find it, and that was the only thing there was to do. Noah still had a chest that was prone to trouble in cold weather. He still left toys on the stairs. He still believed, with the unwavering conviction of a child who has not yet learned that certainty is the enemy of truth, that he could identify any animal from 50 feet away. He was wrong about this approximately 60% of the time. He considered his 40% accuracy an outstanding record. But the house wasn't quiet in the same way. Claire made dinner on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Ethan made it the other nights except Friday, which was Noah's night to pick the restaurant. And the restaurant was almost always the diner on Main Street, where the grilled cheese was cut diagonally and the hot chocolate came with a marshmallow already melting in it. They'd been going there for 2 weeks when the waitress, whose name was Bree, and who had been Claire's co-worker before, Claire quietly began looking into returning to her nursing program, said to Ethan, "Your family's sweet?" And he looked at Claire, who was helping Noah navigate the laminated menu, and at Noah, who was explaining to her with great seriousness that the marshmallow was the most important part, and he said, "Yeah, just that. Not an explanation, not a qualification. Just, yeah." He drove home that night thinking about how strange it is that families get made. Not the way you plan them, not with a ceremony or an announcement or even a decision you could point to and say, "There, that was the moment." They just accumulate, the way warmth does in a cold house. You add enough of it, and eventually you realize the drafts are gone. He thought about the night of the rain, the way he'd stood in the hallway between 2 closed doors and weighed the discomfort of asking against the cold creeping into his son's room. He thought about Claire opening her door and saying, "It's fine. You don't have to sleep on the floor." He thought about a fox in the rain, taking the long way home, and a barn full of warmth that left an impression for life. He thought about the whisper, not a dramatic one, not a revelation, just Claire's voice, very low in the dark room, saying, "I'm tired of running." That was it. That was the thing that changed. Claire went back to the nursing program in the second week of December. Not the same campus, she'd transferred to the community college in Ashford, 40 minutes south, which meant she could commute on days Ethan was on the early shift and Noah was at school. It meant rearranging schedules and calling in favors and figuring out childcare for the 2 afternoons per week when Noah's school day ended before anyone could pick him up. Mrs. White, who had apparently made a permanent decision to be involved in their lives, offered to take him those days. "I have Sullivan," she said, as if this were sufficient credential. It was, as it turned out. Noah adored Sullivan. Sullivan was indifferent to Noah in the friendly, mutual way of cats who have accepted that someone will try to put them in hats. The day Claire left for her first class, Ethan made coffee before she was up. He had it ready when she came into the kitchen at 6:30, her bag over one shoulder, her green coat on, her hair still slightly damp from the shower. She stopped when she saw the coffee. "For luck," he said. She took it. She stood at the counter and looked at the cup and didn't say anything for a moment. "I'm scared," she said. "I know. What if I can't?" "Claire." She looked at him. "Go," he said. "Just go." She nodded. She drank half the coffee. She put the cup in the sink and picked up her bag and went to the door. She paused there with her hand on the frame. "Thank you," she said. "For the room. For the night." "Thank Noah," he said. He was cold. She smiled at that small and real and slightly crooked. The smile, he had learned over 3 weeks of actually paying attention, was her genuine one. The one she didn't produce, just had. "Tell him I'll bring home the good marshmallows," she said. "He'll hold you to that." "I know." She opened the door. The morning was cold and clear, the first real frost of December glittering on the porch rail. She stepped through it. Ethan stood at the window and watched her car pull out and head south. The street was quiet. The light was blue-white and new. He poured himself the rest of the coffee and stood there for a while, thinking about nothing in particular, or maybe everything: Rebecca and guilt and the specific loneliness of a house that has too many rooms and not enough voices, about how you can live with someone for 8 months and not know them at all, about how it takes a storm, sometimes, or a child going cold, or a whisper in the dark to break through the particular kind of stubborn that grief makes you. He heard Noah stir down the hall. He called out, "Morning, Bud. Is Claire gone?" "Already gone." A pause. Then, with the philosophical resignation of a 6-year-old, "Okay." Ethan smiled. He went to make his son's breakfast. That winter was the coldest Millhaven had seen in 11 years. The boiler held. The weather stripping on Noah's window got replaced. Mrs. White came for dinner on Sundays and brought Sullivan, who had developed a complicated relationship with the puzzle on the coffee table. They'd had to restart it twice after he'd redistributed the pieces. Claire finished the fall semester with a B+ in pharmacology and a strong feeling, she told Ethan one evening, that she might actually be okay at this. "Might?" he said. "Probably," she said. "Tell your professor." "Definitely." She threw a dish towel at him. They weren't a perfect family. They were a specific one assembled from loss and distance and a cold Friday night in November. Held together by proximity and effort, and a 6-year-old who had decided, with the clear authority of a child who knows what he knows, that Aunt Claire was the correct word for what she was. On Christmas Eve, Noah arranged 4 stockings on the fireplace mantel. 1 for Ethan, 1 for himself, 1 for Claire. 1 small extra, which upon investigation turned out to be for Sullivan, because, Noah explained, Mrs. White was coming for breakfast and it would be rude if Sullivan didn't have a stocking. Ethan stood there and looked at the 4 stockings, red and uneven against the white mantel, and thought, this is what you come home to, not the house you planned, not the arrangement you mapped out, but what shows up and stays, and slowly fills the rooms that used to echo. He had not, in 2 years of grief, expected any of this. He had expected to continue, that was the honest word for what he had been doing. Continuing moving through the required motions of fatherhood and employment and home maintenance, carrying the weight of Rebecca's absence, the way you carry a stone you have stopped trying to put down. He had not expected a cold Friday in November to break anything open. He had not expected a stepsister he barely knew to whisper something true in the dark and have it matter. He had not expected to find out that a family could be rebuilt from parts. He heard Claire in the kitchen, a cupboard, water running, the small sounds of someone making something. He heard Noah in his room, badly whispering to himself about Santa with the conviction of a child who has decided that loud skepticism in December is a risk not worth taking. Outside, snow for the first time this season, sifting down through the street lamp's yellow circle, settling on the porch rail, making the world quiet and new. He stood in the living room between all of it and felt, for the first time in a long time, that he was standing somewhere real. He thought of the fox in Claire's story, the one that took the long way home, the one that found the warm barn by accident, by cold and desperation and the failure of every other plan. The one that came back every winter not because it had to, but because some things leave a mark on you that doesn't lift. He thought, I understand that fox now. Dad? Noah, appearing in the hallway in his socks and his pajamas, voice hushed with Christmas Eve reverence. Is who almost done? Claire. He said it with the easy familiarity of ownership. My Aunt Claire. She said she was making something special. I don't know. Go ask her. Noah padded to the kitchen with purpose. Ethan heard Claire's voice, low and warm. Heard Noah's response, a small giggle. Heard the particular sound of his son being happy, which was still, even now, even after everything, the most important sound in the world. He stood in the living room. That was enough. For now, it was more than enough.